The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie?
So there's Mark Carney asking what possible conflict of interest he might have. Well, turns out a lot of them. 574 to be exact. And Pierre Poilievre has wasted no time coming out swinging against Mark Carney today. Because this isn't just a conflict of interest, guys. This is insider trading and profiteering off the Canadian taxpayer and the gullible Liberal voter. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Johnny Says So. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel on your way in. So, the Ethics Commissioner has just recently dropped the massive list of all of the investments that Mark Carney holds, which he tried to hide from the Canadian public going into the last election. And it really isn't hard to see why he tried to hide this stuff, guys. Brookfield comes up an awful lot, and it's not just Mark Carney as Prime Minister, but when he was economic advisor to Justin Trudeau, they enacted a lot of policies and made a lot of suggestions that Brookfield would stand to financially gain from, and in turn, Mark Carney. You know, things like subsidizing heat pumps and massive amounts of modular houses being built. Brookfield is heavily invested in all of this stuff, guys. Now, I simply don't have time to go through all of the companies that are in this list. But one thing you're going to notice about this list when you scroll through it, guys, is there certainly aren't a lot of Canadian companies in here. In fact, over 98% of them are American companies. Check this out, guys. American Airlines Group, American Express, Bank of America. You guys get the picture. So it doesn't seem to me like Mark Carney is putting his money where his mouth is. He claims to be elbows up and fighting for Canadians, yet he seems to be invested heavily in American companies succeeding in this trade war. Not a good look. Now, even if Mark Carney puts all this stuff into a blind trust or otherwise sells some of his shares or divests, you can't ignore the fact that he was advising Justin Trudeau during his time as Prime Minister and making a killing off of some of this stuff, guys. And I cannot ignore two companies on this list, and I don't see a lot of other people talking about it. So I'm just going to point this out to you guys now. Look at this. Shares of Moderna. And if you scroll down here, shares of Pfizer. Now, what was Mark Carney doing during the pandemic? He was advising Justin Trudeau as his economic advisor while investing in the companies that were mandating their products to be injected into the arms of every Canadian. A massive propaganda campaign on the news media to get every single Canadian to take these products. And Mark Carney was profiting from all of it. So like I said in the beginning, Pierre Poilievre comes out strong today, demanding accountability and repercussions for Mark Carney. Let's check it out.
On Friday, we finally got a look at the Prime Minister's many financial interests that he kept carefully hidden throughout the election and about which he told numerous falsehoods during that same campaign. And so these are what the revelations tell us. One, that Mr. Carney was not upfront or honest with Canadians during the election. He made numerous false statements he would have known were false when he made them. Two, there is a cornucopia of conflicts of interest in these investments, like we have never seen before from a Canadian Prime Minister. Let me go through and document all of these claims one by one. First of all, during the election campaign, Mr. Carney said, and I quote, "I own nothing but cash and personal real estate, and that's not going to change in public life." Well, it turns out, while he said that, he knowingly owned 574 stocks and deferred profits and stock options in Brookfield and other companies. So it was patently and now provably false for him to say he owned nothing but cash and real estate. Two, my assets are now in a blind trust So I don't know what exactly is in there. That too is false. He must have known what was in the blind trust because he was the one that filled out the paperwork for the Ethics Commissioner to report those holdings.
You'd think for such a genius banker and genius economist, the guy would be able to cover his tracks a little bit more. But I honestly don't think these people care about covering their tracks. They are openly showing you that they are in charge. Truly despicable.
Holdings. So he knew exactly what was in his blind trust, and he just did not want Canadians to know before they went to the polls. Finally, he said, and I quote, "I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management." Well, it turns out that he has continuing stock options and deferred share units in Brookfield Asset Management. And these options cannot be sold, or at least not easily, and we have no reason to believe they have been. So when he said that he had no connection to Brookfield, he was stating a patent falsehood. Now, why should we care? Why should Canadians care about this? Well, Mr. Carney has shown in the past his willingness to use his political connections in order to profit himself. For example, he said, let me see here, he gave public endorsement of Westinghouse in the leaders' debate. Westinghouse is a nuclear energy company which Brookfield is invested in. He has announced he's going to spend billions of dollars on modular homes. Brookfield is invested in modular homes. He says he wants to subsidize heat pumps. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps. He says that jet fuel, in the past he has said that he helped influence regulatory changes forcing aviation companies to buy certain kinds of jet fuel that one of his companies was invested in, so that air passengers have to pay more for their airline ticket to subsidize this specialty jet fuel.
This is very true, and it's super egregious, guys. This is sketchy. Look at this, guys. So Ryan Garrettson on Twitter points this out. In 2024, Carney admitted to being involved in government policies that benefit him and others as investors. A policy in the UK demanded airliners use 10% sustainable aviation fuel so that he invested $1 billion into the company that provided it to them. Watch this, guys, right from the horse's mouth.
You may be seeing a path back to the public sector.
Well,
policy.
I do spend some time advising on what, again, pro bono, but advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors. So I'll give you an example, which is one of the issues. It's not the biggest issue. It's like 2% of global emissions. You wouldn't know it from the headlines, but 2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. Now, so the question is, are we going to have green, sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some.
I'd like to point out that this is consequence of that policy. That policy only exists because of globalists like Mark Carney. So what I don't understand is how liberals can honestly support this. This is fascism, guys. One of the textbook definitions of fascism is a merger of corporations and the state. This is exactly what this is.
Entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case, a company called Infineon, to become economic, because all of a sudden American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality, and so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity. The point being, without the policy, the policy has to drive it and drive things down. So yeah, I'm dodging your question.
I know, I know you're dodging the question.
He even admits to dodging the question. Wow, guys. Anyway, let's get back to Pierre.
Profits, a company in which Mr. Carney had a financial interest. And the list of potential conflicts goes on and on. How can he possibly be involved in developing a budget when all the tax policies could impact on his investments directly or indirectly? How could he address things like competition policy when his companies might be impacted. Then there's, for example, the digital services tax. The digital services tax is paid by some of the companies that he is invested in, and therefore he has a potential or perceived conflict of interest in that as well.
That's another great point, guys. If we go back to the list, you can see there are so many tech companies in here. You got Netflix, you got Meta, it's staggering how many technology companies Mark Carney is invested in. So either way, the digital service tax was going to generate revenue for him. Truly despicable stuff, guys.
So Conservatives are calling for two things today. One, we call on the Prime Minister to come before you and explain the contradiction. How is it that he was telling Canadians that he only had real estate and cash when he knowingly had stock options and other deferred benefits? How is it that he claimed he didn't know it was in his blind trust when we now learn that he knew exactly what was in that trust? And how is it that he said that he had no financial interest in Brookfield when he knew exactly that he had stock options and deferred share units? Finally, so we want him to explain why he told Canadians the opposite of the truth during the election campaign. Second, we're calling on the Prime Minister to sell his investments, turn them into cash, hand them to a trustee who can invest them in a way that is completely blind to him, so that he does not have any knowledge of what he owns. That is the spirit of a blind trust. A blind trust is meant to be something that the owner does not know anything about. That's what it means.
So I would like to propose going a little bit further than Pierre Poilievre on this one. I don't want Mark Carney to just simply divest and sell his assets. I'd like Mark Carney to resign in disgrace, to get out of the Prime Minister's chair, because he has already shown himself to be a corrupt, lying bastard. So there you have it, guys. The official opposition and even the legacy media has picked up on what we all knew from the very beginning, that Mark Carney is completely captured by corporate interests, American corporate interests at that. He was completely lying about elbows up, and he will sell this country down the river at the first opportunity to make a fast buck. Let me know what you think down in the comments. What do you think is the most egregious revelation from these documents? And as always, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Johnny from Nova Scotia says thank you. Hey, Johnny from Nouvelle-Écosse, il dit merci, thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you so much. Perfect.
We're from Quebec.
Yeah, Quebec.